Welcome back to World Politics. Now, a royal welcome for Emmanuel Macron today. The French president and his wife touched down in Brussels this morning to begin a two-day official state visit. The couple was greeted by the King and Queen of Belgium and also met with Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel. But while the French leader sits down to a Belgian banquet, back at home, the so-called Yellow Vest protests continue. Demonstrators are angry about rising fuel taxes, and one woman was hit by a car and killed this weekend after a driver panicked after being stopped by protesters. More than 400 people were injured. The protests are the latest domestic blow to a president whose popularity has slumped and a further 4 points this month. Well, joining me now to dig a little deeper on all things Macron is Pauline Bock, a French journalist and contributor to The New Statesman and other publications. And back with me is Esther Zalan, a reporter with the EU Observer, and Shada Islam, director of Europe and Geopolitics at Friends of Europe. All right, Pauline. We've seen this before with Emmanuel Macron. Him being on the world stage here, parading with, the King and Queen of Belgium, while that is happening at home. Is this deliberate?
Is it deliberate? I think he's just following his course. He thinks that if he does not really acknowledge what's happening, or if he doesn't make a big deal out of it, then it will eventually go away, or at least he will be able to control what's happening. He's been said to be very tired at the moment, so it may also be a way of not saying something that's wrong. But I don't think it's going to work. I think this especially is a big movement that came out of nowhere and that no one really controls. It's not really, it's being backed by the FN, the far right, but it's not coming from the far right. No one really understands who are these people. They're from different places. They're from all over France, and they're just very angry. That's not going to go away. So
is he ignoring it? And this could backfire on him if he doesn't pay enough attention to what's happening back home.
Yes, it could backfire. I think what he is also trying to do is to hammer home this idea that he's the one who beat Marine Le Pen. So on the European level, he's trying to position himself as the opposition to the Salvinis, to the Orbans, and sort of keep reminding people back home that this is what I'm standing for. This is what separates us. I'm the one who separates us from Marine Le Pen becoming president, but it doesn't seem to work that well.
It doesn't work anymore at all. I think people at this point are more angry at him than they are at Le Pen.
So Shada, how big of a gamble is this for Emmanuel Macron, trying to position himself in such a way in the grander scheme of things in Europe as the all those of the far right movement? Could this just feed into the hands of people who say, well, look at what they're doing to Europe and to your livelihoods and to your lives?
It could, but I think also Europe needs a man like Macron at the moment. Every single politician has two personas. Back home, where you have to deal with the nuts and bolts, the nitty-gritty of what reform is, and reform and change is not easy. I mean, he is right when he says you need to raise taxes to pay for renewable energy. I mean, that's an argument for climate change, people who are pushing for, stronger policies on renewables. That should make a difference. But the reality is that people's, income is affected. So you have to deal with that. There are two personas, the European politician, the international politician who shines on the global stage, and then back home you have to deal with the reality of what governing is all about. And, politicians, Merkel has the same problem, have to deal with that, have to juggle these two priorities, these two concerns.
Well, and speaking of what Macron has to deal at home, more than 250,000 people have turned out to join the protest from the very north of the country all the way down to Marseille. They're all saying the same thing, that they have had enough. Take a listen.
Ils ne nous écoutent pas, donc on voudrait faire passer le message qu'ils baissent toutes les taxes, que nous, le petit ouvrier, on ne peut plus vivre.
Là, aujourd'hui, je me mobilise avec tous les citoyens parce que je m'inquiète pour mon futur. Moi, je suis en terminale. Avec moi, je travaille en dehors du lycée. Mon salaire de lycéen ne me permet même pas de pouvoir rien que payer l'assurance de la voiture, par exemple. C'est beaucoup trop et c'est plus possible.
Avec toutes les taxes, tout ce qu'il fait Macron, tout ce qu'il a mis et tout ce qui va augmenter sans arrêt et qui augmente, le pouvoir d'achat des gens a tellement baissé, nous les retraités, mais plus pour les jeunes, parce qu'on va aller où comme ça, sans arrêt.
Et quand on voit finalement l'ISF, il est supprimé, alors que pour les jeunes, les APL, on va enlever 5 €. Donc on a du mal un peu à comprendre le message qui est envoyé. Donc on s'est dit, si on ne se réveille pas maintenant, on ne le fera jamais, quoi.
I mean, it's become more than just about fuel taxes. It's about, cost of living and survival for the French people. his popularity rating is down to 25% from 29%. How can Macron weather this?
I think he'd have to listen to actually, well, that's what they say, to first acknowledge their anger, and he's tried to do that. But his Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has said, "I hear you, but we're not going to change course," and so that won't work because they still feel like they're not being listened to, and unless he does something. Even if it's not to actually.
But then what you're saying is
taxes,
listening to them would mean not going through with the reforms that Chada says is needed.
Not necessarily, but for what the young man was saying about cutting the tax for the rich, the ESF, I think that was a big mistake for Macron because that's one of the first things he did, and it really sent a message that he was what he's been called the president of the rich. And he's not really done anything to balance that for the poorer people, or at least people who are struggling a bit, like all these people were saying. He needs to send some kind of message to them that even if he has to do this reform, and he can do that, he can tell them, we need to do this, but look, I've heard what you're saying, I've heard your anger, and I'm going to try and do something else to,
And we've seen in the past, fuel prices, protests that began with fuel price increases have become bigger for governments. Is this still a far-off scenario for Emmanuel Macron or a possibility?
Well, he definitely needs to make gestures, that's for sure. And I'm sure that it didn't help all these scandals in which he seemed very aloof and very detached from the population, with the bodyguard and all the other scandals, which were not big, but just reinforces that image that he's president for some other group of people, for the rich, and not for the everyday French citizen.
Well, certainly
it adds up. It adds up to it's one declaration after another that is just always either making fun or trying to make a joke that backfires, and it's always about the people that he doesn't really talk to or know.
We will be seeing a lot more of Emmanuel Macron as the European elections draws closer. All right, let's now move on to today's Power Play, which today is actually top secret. Let's take a look. From Brussels with love, EU defence ministers are congregating in the Belgian capital today, and they're reportedly plotting the creation of a joint EU spy school. The UK, with its own world-leading intelligence services, has long opposed an EU intelligence alliance. But as Dr. No Deal stumbles towards the exit, Brussels is perhaps eyeing an opportunity to live and let live. So that was a Politico report there about the spy school. Shada, do you think, what was the point being made by defense ministers when they talk about this?
I always look at this as ABC. So A, response to America first, or we're turning inwards, we're not going to be there, loyal partners for Europe. So Europe has to take care of its own destiny, its own future. B, for Brexit. Britain out, we can move ahead with certain, things that they were blocking before, and C for China, rising China. And you could put Russia there too, So the message, I think it's an interesting message. How far we can go, how quickly we can go that far, I don't know. But it's interesting messages coming out from the European Union, European Army, the spy school, PESCO, all of these signs of maturity, a kind of defense awakening, security awakening in Europe.
But can it really be done?
I would be interested in the details because there have been concerns raised within the NATO about some allies, which are EU members as well, that they might be passing on some secrets to Russia or to other countries. So the devil is in the details, as always.
We will be looking at those details indeed. All right, we have a lot more coming up for you on Raw Politics after the break. A Dutch Christmas tradition fuels a polarized debate about racism. That's coming up.